Hi, PerspectiveWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Monday, October 19th. It's that transitional time of the year where we still have to deal with tropical activity in parts of the Atlantic Basin. At the same time, cold air shots are making their way from Canada into the U.S. We even have some significant snow in the forecast for the northern plains and interior northwest over the next 5 or 10 days or so. So while we're getting some cold air outbreaks from Canada into the U.S., we still have to monitor some tropical activity. There's one system out there right now, the Central Atlantic, and there may be a second one to deal with, or at least to monitor, that forms over the Caribbean over the next several days. Neither one of these right now look like they'll ever impact the U.S. mainland, but it's way too early to write off either one. This is one right now sitting over the Central Atlantic, labeled as Tropical Depression number 27 in this very active tropical season, at least for the Atlantic. The Pacific has been well below normal for this tropical season. It is a very slow move and remaining relatively stationary over the next few days, so we'll continue to monitor. Again, there is a possibility that something else forms down in this region over the next 5 or 10 days or so. So we'll monitor both areas as we transition from October into the early part of November. Still some pretty warm waters here in the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the southwestern Atlantic. Meanwhile, while there's still some tropical activity in the Atlantic Basin, or at least parts of the Atlantic Basin, look at this. This is a snow forecast map from last night's 6Z operational run of the GFS for the next 10 days. Quite substantial amounts, as a matter of fact, over the northern plains and really all the way into the interior northwest. Quite a significant look, maybe in some cases a foot or more over the next 10 days or so. So again, while there may be some tropical activity down here in the Caribbean Sea, the Gulf of Mexico over the next 5 or 10 days, and over the Central Atlantic, upstream, north and west, we have some cold air outbreaks and indeed some accumulating snow to look forward to over the next 5 or 10 days or so. Well, let's walk through the temperature pattern as depicted by the operational run of the GFS at 6Z. This is the 850 millibar sequence of forecast maps going forward here, where the blues and purples represent colder than normal air and the reds and oranges warmer than normal air. Pretty comfortable along the mid-Atlantic coastline and pretty much the entire eastern seaboard, with normal to slightly above normal temperatures, but the cold air right now certainly noticeable over the interior northwest and northern plains. And let's move forward here and just watch this pattern evolve. Again, it stays fairly comfortable, fairly dry throughout the week in the eastern U.S., but pretty cold up across the northern plains, and certainly Canada, especially the southwestern part of Canada, experienced some colder than normal conditions this time of the year. This is the forecast map for Thursday. Let's continue to move forward. Still the normal to above normal across the eastern half of the nation, but the interior northwest turns really cold by the end of the week. And again, some accumulating snow, perhaps even some significant accumulating snow over the next 5 or 10 days or so, from, let's say, Montana, Wyoming, all the way across the northern plains into perhaps the upper part of the Midwest. Some of that colder air works its way to the south and east into the eastern third of the nation, but it will be quite difficult. This could kind of foreshadow what to expect over the next few months. We issued our winter outlook last Wednesday, and one of the things we'll be monitoring is a high pressure ridge over the southeast U.S. Certainly La Nina type of winter pattern generally has colder air masses pouring in, just as we see right here from the southwestern part of Canada into the interior northwest and northern plains. The upper Midwest will have a little more difficulty making its way into the mid-Atlantic region and the northeast U.S. In this particular case, it looks like some of that colder air finally kind of oozes its way in, but not until the middle part of next week. So while a lot of cold air exists over the next 5 or 10 days or so in the from the northwestern U.S. all the way to the Great Lakes, it takes a little while to make its way into the mid-Atlantic region and the northeastern part of the nation. Once it gets here, it kind of sticks around for a while. Again, we're looking at next week. This is for the middle part of next week. Quite an impressive chill coming to the eastern half of the nation later next week, going into the end of the month of October. Well, let's now take a look at the surface forecast maps. Generally dry conditions along the East Coast for the next several days. Places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City will be hard-pressed to see much, if any, rainfall over the next 5 to 6 days or so. This looks like a pretty impressive frontal system, but watch as we move forward. It just tends to fall apart. Again, kind of influenced by our upper-level ridging over the southeast U.S. Some of the shower activity certainly makes its way into the western part of the Mid-Atlantic, the western part of New England, but it generally tends to fall apart by the time it reaches on the eastern side of the Appalachian Mountains. Very little, if any, rain from that first frontal system along the I-95 corridor region. Look at here now, by tomorrow night, some snow, maybe some accumulating snow up across the northern plains, as again, they'll be experiencing some impressive cold air shots. Another frontal system has some precipitation with it, and again, it tends to weaken by the time it reaches the eastern seaboard, with little, if any, rain at all expected in the I-95 corridor region. Now here comes the influence of the one tropical system, and again, it certainly looks like it may develop into a tropical storm, perhaps even a hurricane. Doesn't look like it'll ever make it, hopefully not, to the east coast of the U.S., but it's something we'll have to monitor. This is now the end of the week forecast map for Friday. Here we have probably a hurricane at this time off the eastern seaboard, but a strong cold frontal system kind of charging to the east. Look at this, 1043 millibar high, a Canadian cold high pressure system over the southwestern part of Canada at the end of this work week. That frontal system makes its way to the eastern seaboard and helps to turn away this particular system. I guess this would be Epsilon. It's kind of hard to keep track at this time, but again, very likely to become a tropical storm and then maybe even a hurricane. I think it would be called Epsilon. Right now it's tropical depression number 27. This is when some cooler air does start to head to the east and works its way into the northeastern part of the nation. May wait until a second or third frontal system actually works its way into the east. Now we're talking a week from now, next Wednesday, and some rain will accompany that transition to that colder air finally working its way into the Mid-Atlantic, the northeastern U.S. We're talking right now the middle part of next week. And according to this run of the GFS, that cold air mass pretty much in full force makes its way into the northeastern part of the country by the end of next week. But for this week, generally dry conditions in much of the eastern U.S. A couple of tropical systems we may have to monitor over the next several days. One already exists out in the central Atlantic. Will certainly develop into a tropical storm, it looks like, and probably even a hurricane. Most likely staying off of the eastern seaboard. There may be another tropical system that forms over the next 5 or 10 days or so over the Caribbean Sea or the Gulf of Mexico. We'll have to monitor. Meanwhile, to the north and west, cold air masses certainly make their way easily into the northwestern U.S., the northern plains, the upper part of the Midwest. It may take until next week for some of that colder than normal air to work its way all the way into the Mid-Atlantic and the northeast U.S. Expect some accumulating snow in the northern plains, interior northwest over the next 5 or 10 days. That's it for now for PerspectiveWeather.com. I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.